Hey everybody, welcome to Frannie Square and to the third episode of the Make It Your Own Design series, where we're going to be talking all about swatching. Okay, so in episode 2, we filled out our project planning sheet. We chose our materials, we chose our stitches, any edgings and motifs that we thought would go with our stitches, and we drew a rough sketch of our project. Now, if you remember in episode 1, I said swatching could be steps 8, 9, 10, 11. I swatch many times during a design project, and each time I learn something, I change things up and do another swatch. And I'm going to show you some examples of that. For this design project, I chose a placemat, and if you remember, I chose Ice Yarn's Cotton Chunky Yarn. I wanted a cotton yarn for a placemat so I could wash it easily and it could withstand heat. And I chose an alternating front and back loop half double crochet stitch because I felt the weave would be close enough and I thought it would help my project go more quickly than, say, doing a single crochet. The one question I had in my mind was, will it be flat enough for a plate and a cup, because I want my placemat to be fairly flat so that things don't topple over. Now, when I make a swatch, I like to make them about 6 inches by 6 inches. I feel like that gives me enough to see how the stitch is working and if I think it's going to be the stitch I want to use for the project. So I started out making this 6 by 6. Now, I'm warning you, when you see it, it's not 6 by 6, and I'll tell you why. As I started to use this yarn, the first thing I noticed was how badly it splits. It's a splitting nightmare, to be honest with you. I love the colors. I love the feel of the fabric. The splitting, though, can be difficult. So when I was doing the half double crochet, alternating front and back loop, I don't know if you can see this closely, there's places where it was just splitting, and it was so difficult to make it look neat. I thought it looked messy. Also, the alternating gave it kind of a ripply effect. I don't know if you can tell here. So it's not as flat as I want it. It would be okay, but I wanted a flatter look. So immediately I knew I wanted to change that stitch. So that's the reason I made this bigger. I don't like to make things just for no reason, so I made it bigger knowing that I'm going to use this as a trivet. So then when I got to the edging, I tried the edging that I had chosen, which had spikes. So you would drop down to a row below for a stitch in certain spots. And again, with the splitting yarn, that was difficult. And I thought to myself, I have to keep this simple. I still want to use this yarn, and I really love the colors, but a simple stitch was the way to go. So I decided to do just a single crochet around the edge, and I like the way that looks, so I'm going to keep that as my edging, and now I have a trivet for myself. So for the second swatch, I decided not to alternate front and back loop stitches. I figure this way my stitch will be flatter. Now I could just do half double crochets the whole way, but I wanted some interest in the stitch. So I decided to do a single crochet, then a double, then a single, then a double, and just alternate like that down each row. And what I came up with was this, which I like the look of much better. It's flatter, and because I wasn't trying to catch front loops and back loops, it came out much neater too. It didn't split as easily, and I kept the border as a single crochet. So I really like the way that looked. The other thing I noticed was I did like changing up the color of the body. So I may do placemats with different color bodies and then the other colors as the borders. So that's what I learned as far as my material, stitches, and edging for this project with these swatches. So for this project, I needed 2 swatches to get the information I needed and to end up with a product that I liked. Not bad. For other projects, I've had to make more swatches depending on the project. For example, right now I'm in the final stages of putting together a mosaic crochet tutorial for a tote bag, and for that project I made several swatches, as you can see. to finally come up with a design that I liked. Don't be discouraged by needing to swatch more. Think of swatching as a chance to learn. With every project I learn, and in the end, a lot of times I use my swatches for something else. So how do I make my swatch? It's very easy. I've already chosen my material and my stitch, and I choose the hook size that goes with the material that I chose. So this yarn called for a 6mm hook. I started with that, and then I can adjust after that if I think I need to. I chain the number of chains that will give me about a 6-inch length. And I usually go a little bit over because I notice as I crochet that piece gets a little bit smaller. But after you do a few rows, measure it again, make sure it's 6 inches. If it's not, take it out, add chains or subtract chains depending on if you need the piece to be longer or shorter. Then I continue crocheting in the stitch until I get it to be 6 inches in height. So now I have a 6x6 square. And the reason that I do that is because it helps me not only to see how my stitch is working over a larger piece, but it also helps me to calculate fairly easily how much material I'm going to need. So the first thing I need to do to figure out how much material I'm going to need for the project is to figure out how much material I'm using as I make my swatch, as I'm doing my stitches. So what I do is, after I have set up my swatch, and it's about 6 inches long, and I've done a row or two just to make sure my stitch is consistent, what I'll do is I will take a ruler and I will measure off 36 inches or a yard of yarn. Then, once I measure that off, at that spot, I'll just take a clip of some sort and clip it to the yarn. And then I will continue crocheting along until I get to the clip. Once I get to the clip, I know I've used a yard or 36 inches of the yarn. If I'm not finished my row, I measure off another 36 inches and continue crocheting till I get to the end of the row. Now, if I haven't gotten to the clip, by the time I get to the end of the row, all I do is measure how much yarn is left of that yard. So say it's 10 inches that I have left. I know that I used 26 inches of that yard. So if I had used a full yard plus that 26 inches, I know I used 36 inches plus 26 inches, which is 62 inches, I hope, if my math is correct, for that one row of stitches that is 6 inches long. There are many ways that people do this. I like to do it 1 yard at a time. I find that to be easiest. So once I've figured out how many inches of yarn it takes me to do one 6-inch row, I write that down. 1 6-inch row of my single, double, single crochet stitch equals 62 inches of yarn. And then I will use that in my material calculation worksheet, which we're going to get to next. So the next thing we want to do is calculate the amount of yarn we're going to need for our project. And to do that, I've included a material calculation worksheet in the description below. So as we go through this calculation, keep in mind we're doing a simple rectangular project. If you're going to be doing something like a garment, then you would have to figure out your yarn based on each piece, your sleeve, your front piece, maybe if it has a V-neck, there's different calculations, but we're keeping it really simple for this first project. It's just rectangular. Now, in my swatch, I know that the body stitch is a single crochet, double crochet, alternating stitch, and the edging is just a single crochet. So the body stitch is going to take a little bit more yarn than the edging stitch because there are some double crochets in it. For me, that's close enough to estimate the entire placemat. If I had an edging that was much more complicated and used up much more yarn, then I would calculate the edging separately. But I know that if I calculate the entire placemat based on this stitch, it's going to be a conservative calculation and I'm going to have enough yarn based on my estimation. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to estimate the entire placemat, which is 18 inches by 13 inches, based on the amount of yarn I used for the body stitch. Okay, so if you want to stop the video now and go print out your material calculation worksheet so you can follow along, go ahead and do that. If not, I'm going to take you through mine so you see how I do it. And remember, if you have any questions at all, just put them in the comments below and I will get back to you. Okay, so first we start by entering our information. We have the ice cotton chunky yarn, 6mm hook, my stitch is a single crochet, double crochet, repeat, and my edging is a single crochet. My swatch length is 6 inches, my swatch height is 6 inches, my stitches per row are 14, my number of rows are 13, and the yarn used per row of stitches was 72 inches. Now our project length is 18 inches and our project height is 13 inches. To find our length multiplier, we're going to divide our project length by our swatch length, so that's 18 inches divided by 6 inches, and that gives me a multiplier of 3. Next, to find the yarn needed per row in inches, I'm going to take the length multiplier times the yarn used per row of stitches. So that's 3 times 72 inches per row, which gives me 216 inches of yarn per row for my project. Now, for the height multiplier, I'm going to take the project height, which is 13 inches, and divide it by the swatch height, which is 6 inches, and I get 2.7. For my project rows, I want to take my height multiplier, which is 2.7, and multiply that by the rows in my swatch, which is 13. That will give me 35.1 rows, which I'm then going to round off to 35 rows. Now, to find the material needed in inches, I'm going to take my yarn needed per row in inches, which is 216 inches, and I'm going to multiply that by the number of rows I have. So that is 216 inches of yarn times my 35 rows, giving me 7,560 inches of yarn needed. Next, I want to convert that to yards, so I take the 7,560 inches and I divide it by 36, which gives me 210 yards. Then I write down the number of yards of yarn per skein of the yarn I'm using, which is 154, and now I divide the 210 yards I need by 154 yards per skein, which will give me 1.4 skeins of yarn needed for each placemat. Okay, so that was the basic calculation. I found for me that for one placemat I need 1.4 skeins of this yarn. So if I want to make 4 placemats, I just multiply that by 4 and I get 5.6 skeins, and I'll round up to 6 and say I need 6 skeins of yarn for 4 placemats. Now, if you found that calculation went a little bit fast for you, slow it down, stop, look at your sheet. I tried to label everything to make the calculations easier. If you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to ask me. I hope that during this episode you see how important swatching is, especially during the design process. You get so much information from it, and it also helps to spur your creativity. Now, in the next episode, we're going to be sitting down and writing our pattern, and then we'll be ready to make our project and share our project with other people. I hope you found this episode helpful, and as always, thank you so much for joining me. I truly appreciate it. Remember to make it your own, and I'll see you soon.